Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to another edition of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Certification Training. We're going to be picking up again after a couple week. We were on a training. Of course, we're teachers and we're still training. All of us are training together. We're going to be picking back up in Chapter 5, The Ripple Effect, Character, Society, and the World. We're going to do a little review because it's been a little while. And for those of you that are tuning in, if you don't have a book, you can go to the official Peaceful Solution Facebook page, and the character unit that we're going through tonight will be available for your download, so you can follow along with us. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started back into Chapter 5 here. Let's go ahead and as you recall, we're talking about the ripple effect in character, society. I'm sorry. We're going to be on page 114 or 113, but we need to go over something very quickly. If we can go back to step 4 on LP 5D in your workbook. We're going to review step 4. And what Chris was doing in the last class was we were going over, it says, explain to students that when people are influenced to engage in risk-taking behavior, this produces a negative effect on themselves, their friends, families, as well as the community. You know, that ripple effect that we were talking about, you know, where, you know, you've seen what occurs when you drop a pebble into a still body of water and how it ripples out. And if you notice in slow motion, when you see that done, when you see a rock dropped in water and you see the circles that ripple out, when the rock drops in slow motion, you'll see that it's more than one drop that keeps coming down. It's like there's a series of drops that go up and keep coming down and go up, keep coming down, go up, keep coming down. It's not, you know, it's very, you have to have it very, very slow motion, but the ripple effect, it's very interesting to watch. But if it's negative ripple effect, it's not interesting to be a part of, and not to have to be on the receiving end of either. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, how our actions, whether positive or negative, they affect not only ourselves, but others around us. And it says, we're going to read pages 113 to 115, entitled, It's Not Just About Me. And we're going to, it says, remind students that by setting our minds in advance to internalize positive character traits, we can avoid many of these destructive behaviors. And as Chris reminded us in the last class, you know, about setting our mind in advance, we can go back on page 80 at any time and review that. And also about influences on page 60, okay? But setting our mind in advance is just simply making up our mind not to do certain behaviors, negative behaviors, and then stick with it. You know, don't let anything deter you from making the right choices, okay? And to internalize positive character traits means to make them part of us, you know, to take honesty and respect and responsibility and self-control and all these great character traits taught in the Peaceful Solution, and make them a part of our life through practicing them on a daily basis. And trust me, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to practice the Peaceful Solution out there in society, and even with yourself. You know, a lot of times when we think of the word respect, we tend to think of, you know, other people, interacting with other people and how we treat other people. But, you know, respect begins with us. How do we treat ourselves? You know, what kind of self-talk are we having in our mind? You know, how are we talking to ourselves? Are we having thoughts that bring ourselves down, that belittle ourselves? Are we calling ourselves names, or are we thinking that we can't overcome certain negative character traits or negative habits? You know, or are we thinking positive thoughts that promote growth, that promote, you know, positive energy, positive affirmations in our mind that tell us, you know, yes, I can overcome this. Yes, I can do anything that's positive, and I can make a difference in this world. Remember, it's a big project we got here. in the peaceful solution, changing the hearts and minds and changing society one individual at a time, but it begins with us, right? We have to start in our own life to begin to make a difference in everyone around us, okay? And that's all about the ripple effect. So let's turn over now to page 113. I want to review a little bit about what Chris went over last time. And it's not just about me. And I want to read that top paragraph. It says, even if you do not commit a crime or perform a violent act, your wrong choices can still have a negative effect on others. Not setting your mind in advance to maintain a positive moral character can make you susceptible or more prone to behaviors that will jeopardize the health and safety of yourself and others. Okay, so remember, every choice that we make, it's going to have either a negative or a positive consequence or a positive result, okay? And we can't think that, well, I've never robbed a bank or I've never stolen from a store or, in teaching the peaceful solution, the more you learn about stealing, the more you learn that, all of us are guilty of stealing to a certain extent in our life, whether we realize it or not. Whether it's surfing the internet at work when you should be doing your work, taking longer breaks than you should, right? Those are all forms of stealing. We can steal time, we can steal authority, we can steal someone's privacy by looking into something that we shouldn't be looking at. Okay, there's little things that we do, that people do. Even the oldest folks sometimes do these things without really realizing that is a form of stealing. So we can't think that these little things are not a big deal, because they are if they're negative. But they're also a big deal if they're positive. Because a positive ripple effect, positive actions, they too have a result. They too have a benefit, and they will ripple out. And you might not see the result right away of your actions or what you might have said or what you might have did. You might not see it right away, but it does come eventually. Okay, so some of the things that Chris went over last class, some of these health or risky behaviors we talked about was premarital sex, which means sex outside of the marriage agreement, promiscuous, not being loyal, relationships without a commitment. I constantly have to ask, I have a lot of students that come from Child Protective Services, and many of them have children from a lot of different marriages. And or not different marriages, but different relationships. They all have a lot of different last names, and you have to ask them. Sometimes I'll ask them, well, if you two are together, and you have children together, why aren't you married? What's keeping you from, taking that step and being loyal and entering into an agreement? You've already got children, you've already got a family. You might as well take the plunge. But it's like people are afraid to practice that positive character trait of loyalty, making that commitment to someone. And but premarital sex is something that we should not be partaking in. Also, excessive consumption of alcohol. Notice excessive consumption. And in this case, if you're a junior high student, you shouldn't be drinking at all, right? But if you're an adult, it's talking about excessive consumption of alcohol. That means drinking too much, overdoing it. I can tell you how many people that have told me, oh, I only have one beer a day, and I'll say, well, what size is it? 64 ounce. Well, that's more like 5 beers in one can, right? That's excessive. That's too much. And then the use of drugs and inhalants. Remember, these are all risky behaviors. Dangerous driving habits, such as texting and racing and speeding, ignoring signs. Improper handling of guns. Okay, all of these things are risk-taking behaviors, and there's many more. And when you think of that statement, it's not just about me. I can't tell you how many times in my life I used to hear when I was growing up, when I got into trouble, I got into some kind of hot water, I would hear from the adults, William, you're only hurting yourself. You're only hurting yourself by doing this. You're only hurting yourself. And it wasn't until this is no joke, when I didn't really even think about that comment or that statement till I was beginning to learn about the peaceful solution back in 1995. Then it started telling me that it's not just about me. And then I realized, yeah, they're right. Man, what do you mean it just hurt me when I kicked my neighbor's door and I stole his TV? What do you mean it only hurt me? Didn't it hurt the person I stole from? Right? And it really, those things never really dawned on me until I got that education, that the peaceful solution gives. But it made a big difference too, because knowing that our actions that we do affect people, not just ourselves, it makes a big difference in our education and in our growth. Now, it says the consequences of choosing to engage in these behaviors will affect not only you, but will ripple out to your family, friends, and even the community. Risky behaviors, it says, can alter your life and rob you of a healthy mind and body. And it says premarital sex results in sexually transmitted diseases. That's STDs for short. Sometimes they call them STIs, like sexually transmitted infections. When I was growing up, they called them VD, venereal disease. Okay, it was VD, back in the 60s and 70s. And it says it also leads to unwanted pregnancy. Now you see STD written on car windshields, And people, when you ask them about STDs, they tend to think, yeah, standard vehicle? No, sexually transmitted disease, right? So you got to make sure people understand what STD you're talking about. Engaging in premarital sex can mean facing the shame and embarrassment of contracting diseases such as herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis, or HIV. Recent studies indicate that there are over 100 sexually transmitted diseases, and numbers are still increasing. Some of these diseases can make you sterile or kill you. I was reading, there's four brand new, not brand new, they've probably been around a little while, but there was 4 new STDs back in 2015 that came to the attention of the scientists. And there's one of them that makes you sterile, okay? So that means that it could cause you not to be able to have children, okay? Now, that's a very big deal. If it might not be a big deal to you right now. If you're a young person, you might think, well, I don't want any children anyway. But remember how your values change as you get older? Your goals and your values, they tend to change with the more education you get, the more experience you have. When you get older, I guarantee you're going to be thinking differently about that. But by then, because of the choices we made at a young age, we might not have that opportunity. It's the same thing with the abortions that Chris talked about. A lot of women, young girls, get abortions, because they're scared. They don't want possibly their parents to find out that they're pregnant, or they don't have the means to take care of the child, or they just want to go out and have fun, and they don't want to be strapped down with a child or whatever. So they make the choice, to go to Planned Parenthood and get an abortion. And a lot of times, there's no parental guidance in the decision-making when they go to Planned Parenthood. And my understanding, Planned Parenthood's not actually trying to talk you out of it so much either. Okay, so they're not really planning parenthood in those places where they're giving these abortions. Now, and we're going to hear more about that as we go on tonight, because we have the author of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program that's going to be joining us here in a little bit, telling you more about that, about the Planned Parenthood. Did you know that also, besides the STDs having an impact, causing sterility, or, causing heart attacks like chlamydia, or like HPV can cause cervical cancer in women? I think Chris mentioned, how the cervical cancer can develop into, or HPV can develop into cervical cancer in women. So cancer, as you notice, is actually a disease that's contagious. Okay? It's contagious because women don't get these things unless they're being promiscuous, like we saw up here about the premarital sex that we shouldn't be getting involved in. And it says, besides that, besides hurting your body and your mind, like syphilis goes to the brain, Al Capone actually died in prison of syphilis. Actually, I think he got out before he died of syphilis, but his syphilis killed him, went to his brain, and it killed him. But these STDs also affect the environment, okay? I have an article right here that came out in 2007. I would like to show you at least the headline here. This is from Live Science. This is from 13 years ago. Let's see, hold on. 2007, that was 14 years ago. It says, yeah, please. It says, look at the headline there. Herpes virus killing coral reefs. Herpes virus is killing coral reefs in the ocean. Now, that's the same virus that human beings get. And how do you suppose these coral reefs get it? Well, they get it from humans. Now, you know, the coral reefs, it says corals get cold sores too. Only for corals, a herpes virus infection isn't just annoying, it can be lethal, and it and other diseases are possibly a big factor in the deaths of coral reefs that humans are causing throughout the world's oceans, new research shows. Remember, this is back in 2007. And even since then, they've actually found the STDs, or STIs, or VD, these different diseases, in the air, in air samples. I know one of the reports I read, it was in San Antonio, Texas, where they did air samples, and they found these things in the atmosphere. STDs, they actually travel. And it says, the killing the coral reef, coral reefs, they keep, they're like a storm barrier. When there's a storm coming in, the reef keeps the storm from destroying the town, basically. It's also a place where fish live, and it promotes life and growth in the ocean, food, and it promotes the financial benefit for a lot of fishermen and other people that live around the ocean in different ways. But did you know that STDs are actually killing things in the environment? They're actually not just harming human beings' health and safety, but also the environment. And remember what we learned in the Peaceful Solution about the environment. Back in, I think it's page, let's see, go back to, let's see. Page 8. Page 8, about morals and what they have to do with character. It says morality can be divided into three basic categories: behavior and attitude toward all life, human, animal, and plant. That would include coral, right? We need to have a caring, considerate attitude toward not just human beings, but also animals, plant life, which gives us oxygen to breathe and things like that. Behavior and attitude toward possessions and property, and behavior and attitude toward the environment. How we treat the environment. We need to be more conscious, and we need to educate ourselves on how these things are actually destroying, the atmosphere, destroying the oceans, destroying getting in the soil. There's many, many things that these STDs do that science is finding out. And actually, as you saw, that article is 14 years old. They're not just finding this out. Okay, it's been a while. Let's get back to page 113. Let's talk about abortions a little bit, because that seems to be a big deal right now. A lot of babies are being, killed, and that's what it is. It's killed. They're being killed. Okay, and as Chris said, I think the quote I wrote down that he said is, "We wouldn't have to kill it if it wasn't alive." A lot of people say, well, the baby's not alive yet. It hasn't come out of the mother and taken its first breath, etc. Well, you know why? Because the baby's on life support in the mother. Okay? A mother is basically a life support system for a baby. Okay? And the baby's breathing and things through, the anatomy of the mother. okay? But if you cut that cord, okay, or you snuff out that life of that woman, well, guess what? The baby dies too, okay? So the baby is actually alive and on life support through that woman, okay? Now, the Chief Justice, Harry Blackmun, back in 1973 in the Roe versus Wade decision, he was the Chief Justice that wrote the opinion on the Supreme Court on the Roe versus Wade opinion. Now, the state of Texas argued, the state of Texas actually said that a fetus is a person, okay? But the Justice Blackmun, I want to read you what he said. I have a little clip here. I'll just read to you. I won't show it to you, but let's see. He said, "We need not resolve the difficult question of when life begins. When those trained in the respective disciplines of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at any consensus, the judiciary, at this point in the development of man's knowledge, is not in a position to speculate as to the answer." In other words, if the religious people and the philosophers and the people in medicine can't figure out if it's a person, then the judiciary is not going to try either, is what he's saying. Okay, but then he also said, if, this is in his opinion in Roe versus Wade, Justice Blackmun, he said, if this suggestion of personhood is established, in other words, if a baby is really a person, if you can establish that, if you can prove that, the appellant's case for abortion, of course, collapses, for the fetus's right to life would then be guaranteed specifically by the 14th Amendment, which provides for life, liberty, right, and the protection for that life of that child. So he said, if you can prove that baby's alive, then we'll give it that protection. Of course, they've since proven these things, and many have proven that a baby is alive in the mother's womb. But it's just not politically expedient for some people to overturn these things. Okay, now, he came to the conclusion that the word person does not include the unborn. But you know what? Have you ever heard of laws called feticide laws? Feticide. Fetus, like killing a fetus. There's actually laws against killing unborn babies. Like, for instance, if you kill a mother in the commission of a crime and she's pregnant, whether you knew it or not, there's many states that will convict you of what's called feticide. That's because the states recognize, and the states have always recognized, remember, the Supreme Court's a federal court, but the state courts have always recognized that a child, the unborn child, is a person. Okay? And there's laws against these things. There's laws against killing unborn babies in the mother's fetus. Okay. Now let's continue here. It says, excessive consumption of alcohol, drugs, and inhalants is addictive and can do permanent damage to your brain. You might have to start doing it because of your trust or care for a friend, or just wanting to fit in or not wanting to be left out. You know, that peer pressure or conformity that we sometimes fall into. And, you know, remember, peer pressure, there's nothing wrong with peer pressure if it's positive and it promotes things that are beneficial and practicing positive character, but it's only detrimental if it's negative peer pressure. It's somebody trying to get you to do something that you shouldn't do, and we should never want to conform or fit in with anything that's negative. You know, we need to grow a backbone, stand up, and stand for what's right. You know, stand for something or you'll fall for anything, as the Peaceful Solution says. Now let's turn over to page 114, because we're catching up to where we left off. I think it was important to go back over these things. It's been a couple weeks. Now it says you might even think, oh, just once won't hurt anything, but in many cases, just once has brought permanent injury to the body and brain. Okay, so let's skip all the way down here to the last paragraph where it talks about risky behaviors on page 114. That's where Chris actually left off. It says, risky behaviors also ripple outward, affecting the community. Teens engaging in risky behaviors frequently drop out of school by the time they reach high school. The events leading to the decision to drop out of high school usually start in junior high. Dropping out of school has serious consequences for the individuals and the community. Without an education, the better high-paying jobs are forever out of reach. Most people who drop out of school drop out of the better opportunities that society has to offer. They resign themselves to a life of poverty and dependence upon governmental programs in order to meet their daily needs. You know, I have some statistics here now, and I can't tell you how many times, once again, I've heard people say, well, what two teenagers do in the back seat of that car, that doesn't affect me. Doesn't matter to me what two consenting adults do. But I want you to consider something here. These government programs that this is talking about right here, I want you to consider some costs here. Medicaid, which is free medical. Is anything free? There's nothing free. Do you realize in 2019, Medicaid nationally cost $613.5 billion? Medicaid. And many of these are young people, teenage pregnancies. You know, they had to have medical, including abortion. The federal government cannot fund abortions, but through Medicaid they can. That's how they do it, through Medicaid, through the Medicaid program. Okay? Do you realize that 17.1 cents of every state-generated dollar goes toward Medicaid? 17.1 cents of every state-generated dollar goes to the Medicaid program. That's just Medicaid. Let's talk about food stamps, the SNAP program. $85.6 billion in 2020. $85.6 billion. Abortions. $530 million was paid to Planned Parenthood. Remember, the federal can pay through Medicaid to Planned Parenthood. That's how they do it. Housing assistance for people that need housing. $51 billion in 2019. The WIC program, which is Women, Infants, and Children program that provides the milk and things for the mothers, $6 billion in 2020. Okay? Think about these costs. These are some very serious costs. Those are, you know, when you add, and I'm just naming a few of the different programs, governmental programs that people become dependent on by dropping out of school, you know, like getting pregnant, not planning pregnancies properly, and dropping out of school. You know, this is going to kind of seem a little strange. I watched, I think it was the Snowy Owls. Ever heard of a snowy owl? I think it was a snowy owl. They eat lemmings. Okay, that's what they feed on, and that's their main staple. It's all you can find where they live, you know, in the snow. Well, you know what? A snowy owl and its mate will not have children when the lemming population is low. In other words, they plan their pregnancies. Snowy owls, birds. Now, if birds can do that, what do you think we could do? If we would stop and consider, you know, if we were educating our children to stop and consider, right? You know, one of the first things a child gets, a young girl gets when they grow up is a little doll to play with, okay? You know, immediately putting it in their mind, you know, of having a baby, right? And there's nothing wrong with a child desiring one day to become a mother or a father or something like that, right? But is that really something that they need to have on their mind so much at that point when they're 2, 3, 4 years old, right? So these things are put into the mind at a very young age. Not to mention the guns. Remember, it talked about up here about the improper handling of guns, which is risky behavior. Gun use is promoted from a very, very young age. What's one of the first things your parents buy you when they go to Toys R Us? Back then, I didn't have a Toys R Us, but, you know, I got a Daisy BB rifle or a what they call those squirt gun, a squirt gun or some kind of, air rifle or something like that. Cap gun, Lone Ranger cap gun, with caps, complete with caps so it would sound like a real gun going off, which has gotten a lot of people in trouble too, by the way, because they do sound real. And if a police officer thinks that that's a real gun and you got it in your hand and it's only a cap gun, it's not going to matter. There's people that have been shot and killed because a cop thought that that was a real gun in their hand. And it was just a play gun, a toy gun. Some of them look very, very real. And a police officer does not have the time to sit there and decide, is that real? Putting guns in the hands of children is not a great thing because it's promoting the idea that they should have a gun, and they should point it at somebody, and they should shoot their friend while they're playing with them. I'll never forget the day I was driving in Laredo, Texas. I'm driving down the street. It was just a little suburb, or not a suburb, but they call it a subdivision in Laredo. And there was two children. There was this big tree, and they were both one on each side of the tree. And the other one was trying to dodge the other one while the other one was trying to shoot him with his gun. And I just looked at that and I thought, that's not a very great idea. Because it wasn't long before that I had seen on national TV, on a news channel, a guy with a real gun doing the same thing to a guy outside of a courthouse. He had a real gun in his hand and the guy was hiding behind the tree and he kept trying to avoid the guy shooting him. The guy kept shooting, and the guy was behind the tree trying to. It was the exact same replication of what I saw on TV in real life. So we really need to stop and think about, these things, because it's what it leads to, when you put a gun in the hand of a child. It's what it can lead to. You might think it's play now, but later on, when they have a real gun in their hand and they're pointing it at somebody, what are you going to tell them then? Drop the gun. And they're going to be like, why? You didn't tell me that before. We're training our children. We got to be very careful about what we're allowing them to partake of. We got to be very careful of this. Now, it says, have you ever, I'm back on page 114 at the bottom, have you ever wondered why there are programs like Alcoholics Anonymous for teens or the DARE program, which is drug abuse resistance education? These programs and many more are society's way of trying to cope with the ever-increasing number of teens who are risking their health and safety. These programs can basically fit into two categories: prevention or intervention. Prevention programs warn teens of the dangers of risky behavior so they won't be influenced to experiment with drugs, alcohol, or sex. The problem with that is, though, just trying to scare a child. They had a meth not even once campaign in Montana, the Montana Meth Project, where they showed people's teeth rotting out and they showed people, what they looked like before they started using methamphetamine and after they were using methamphetamine, the before and after pictures, which were really horrible. But that didn't stop people from doing it. The scare factor wasn't enough. Okay, that's not enough. It says the intervention programs help teens who have engaged in these dangerous behaviors understand why they made these choices, deal with the consequences they're facing now, and avoid making the same mistakes in the future. In the Peaceful Solution, we're all about prevention. Okay, preventing these things from taking place to begin with. Okay? And a lot of these programs, they have the right intent. They start out with the right intent, but they're missing something. They're missing something. Like the abstinence program in Texas. Texas, under George W. Bush, they were teaching abstinence programs. It was actually mandated in Texas to teach. But the problem is, teaching abstinence programs without backing it up with the moral character education as taught in the Peaceful Solution, it doesn't work, because you've got to teach them self-control along with the abstinence. I'll give you an example of how abstinence works. Abstinence truly does work. Abstaining from something, that means not doing it. If I had a glass of poison right here in front of me, and I abstained from drinking that poison because somebody told me, hey, that's poison, don't drink it, it could kill you, right? If I listen to them and I don't touch that poison and drink it, I'm not going to die. So abstinence works, doesn't it? Right? Abstinence works. But you've got to back up the abstinence with the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. It's really the greatest tool on the face of the earth for a child to learn how to avoid these risk-taking behaviors that we're talking about right here. And right now, I promised you, I had the author of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program with us tonight. Not in person, but you'll see him on the video here in just a moment. But this particular speech he gave back in 2009, it was on 3/8/2009 down in Laredo, Texas. We had a bunch of people that were graduating from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Building Moral Excellence program. There was probably about 120 people in attendance. And Mr. Israel Hawkins, the author of the Peaceful Solution Program, gave a great speech on these very things that we're talking about right here. I want you to pay very close attention to what he's telling you about the abstinence programs and about theft, and how teaching the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program would make a difference, a huge difference, but without it, these programs just aren't, they're not going to have what it takes to stop these things. So at this time, I'd ask that you please play the video.
Remember, in the end, we all teach by our examples to others. We were able to get the author of the Peaceful Solution Education Program to give us a statement and to congratulate everyone in Laredo here tonight. I turn it over to the author of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, Israel Hawkins.
Greetings, everyone in Laredo. We want to express our thanks to you today there in Laredo, because we know this is a big event for you and a big event for the Peaceful Solution Character Education there. We want to express our thanks to you, the newcomers here today, that are wanting to get involved in this. I remember all the struggles that we have gone through in the past and all the opposition that we have faced. There are groups out there, that are still relying on condoms to protect them. They've sold this and they're selling it to the world, and of course it doesn't work. China is a very great example here. It says AIDS becomes China's deadliest infectious disease. They were trying to teach their people, as we got groups wanting to teach the people today, how to commit fornication and adultery safely. This doesn't work. The disease has reached about 5 million. That is, they climbed about 5 million in 93 to 98, so you can see the climb. STDs on the rise in America too. And of course we have, I believe they said approximately 19 million. I think that's more like 119 million cases, new sexually transmitted infections occur annually in the United States, just from trying to depend on condoms instead of abstinence, which is the President Bush's push right now to get abstinence taught in all the world. We're out to get the Peaceful Solution Character Education taught, which will reinforce the abstinence plan. The internationally acclaimed orthopedic trauma surgeon, Dr. Lorraine Day, she did much for the Peaceful Solution, a lot, but we still have a lot of opposition. The president has done a lot. President Bush did a lot for us. I understand that Barack Obama is very much interested in this, in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Plan now. But it's all been an uphill battle. But Dr. Lorraine Day, she did a lot. She put out several books. It says that the AIDS virus is not fragile, that the AIDS virus survives outside the body for days, why blood on intact skin is dangerous, why the blood supply still is not safe, what the government really thinks about safety of condoms. Now, of course, I keep harping on the condoms, but that's one of the things that one of our biggest opponents to the peaceful solution is fighting us with. They're wanting to teach the use of condoms. That's their main thing. Now, they call it other things, but they call it the Planned Parenthood, of course. But the push by Planned Parenthood is in the condom business, I think. I think they must be to be pushing it so hard, knowing that it won't work. It's a comprehensive sex education in Illinois has received praise from the usual media sources, of course. And this, of course, is some of the competition to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. Teaching a strong abstinence message in concert with information on contraception is considered a best practice in teen pregnancy prevention. Now, they don't really mean to teach this. And of course, when President Bush endorsed the abstinence plan in the schools, it's a great plan. The only thing, it's kind of left up to the teachers, and the teachers just don't have the material to teach this sufficiently to get the children to understand what they're up against. Now, the Peaceful Solution Character Education does. It teaches the children the choices that they've got to make in life. It also teaches them the dangers of what they do if they don't really study what they're about to use. Once they take this course, they can make their own decisions, and they come out thinking how grateful they were because they see the one that didn't take it over there dying in the hospitals. Now, this sounds really great, what they're saying, what the local media says about Planned Parenthood. But it sounds great till you see the other side of the coin. But would Planned Parenthood be willing to teach a strong abstinence message? Any teenager who accepts abstinence will not become a customer of Planned Parenthood. Such a teenager would not need birth control supplies, pregnancy testing, STD testing and treatment, emergency contraception, or abortion. These are the services that Planned Parenthood sells. What interest do they have in convincing teenagers about behavior that makes these services totally unnecessary? It becomes clear there is no chance that Planned Parenthood would teach any convincing abstinence message. To do so would present a serious conflict of interest for them. On the contrary, Planned Parenthood form of contraceptive sex education is structured to encourage teenagers to become sexually active. Then these teenagers would likely become Planned Parenthood customers. Well, and that's a fact. The Bush administration, if they had added, and this is what we're going to have to convince everyone in the world, this is our goal, of course, to teach everyone in the world the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, because with teachers out there teaching this on their own and having all the other work that they have to do, and they have a big load already, they're not going to really study the options here that they have to use in teaching an abstinence plan, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. It doesn't just cover those fields. It covers a lot more. One of the things that it would help tremendously in right now is the thefts. I remember back a few years ago reading the statistics on thefts in the supermarkets and thefts in Walmart, the large stores, and they have to mark the prices up. The cost of theft right now is costing the average person who must buy things from these stores about 30% at least more now than it did a few years ago. The Peaceful Solution Character Education Program would actually keep people in business. Listen to this. Corporate thieving isn't only practiced at the top. An estimated 79% of workers admit either stealing or considering stealing from their employer. 1 out of every 3 businesses goes out of business because of employee theft. As reported by CNN, even worse, the cheating culture has created an atmosphere that dissuades whistleblowers from coming forward and exposes this extremely perversive practice that cost upwards of $600 billion a year. Well, of course, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, it's already proven to stop theft. In fact, one of the largest schools in Dallas taught this to one of the groups, and the teacher that actually taught the program from our books said for the first time in 8 years she could truly say that there was no stealing going on in her classroom. If you're really relentless in the push of this, and you're going to have to be so if you join this program, because the opposition will fight you down if you're not. But if you'll be relentless, then the Creator will win this battle for us. Thank you.
Okay, so a lot of food for thought there, right? You know, and the point that he was trying to get across is, you know, the abstinence message is a great message, but we've got to back it up with the character education that comes from the Peaceful Solution. You know, the teaching of responsibility, the teaching of honesty and respect for self and others, self-control. These types of character traits would aid a child, a young person, in their decision making, and they would make better decisions that would avoid these risky behaviors. But keep in mind that it really, you know, there's a lot of entities out there that just don't think they'd make any money off that. Okay, the Peaceful Solution, you know, we're a nonprofit organization. We're not in this for the money, obviously. Okay, people are banging the door down to get into movie theaters and things like that. They're not banging the door down to get moral character education. Okay, but we know that's going to change eventually if we're relentless, like the author just said. You know, if we begin in our own life, remember that positive ripple effect? We can't think that this is too big of a job. If any of us right here thought this was too big of a job, would any of us be sitting here right now? No, obviously you do believe that you can make a difference. You can make a difference in your life, and you can make the difference in other people's lives, even if it's just through your example, you know, that you practice on a daily basis in front of other people. So there was another thought I had about that, but I'll have to continue reading, and I'll probably come back into my mind. There was a statement here on page 114 I wanted to go back to real quick about parents. In the middle of the page there, about parents have feelings too. It says, in finding out that their child is engaged in one or more risky behaviors, they feel shocked, disappointed, and even embarrassed. They might feel helpless and doubt their ability to properly raise a child. I remember speaking to a school counselor in Laredo, Texas, in the south side of the town, and he told me that I'm not making this up, every female had an STD in the school. Every single one. The nurse checked. They all had STDs. And when they had to call the parents, and they had to tell them, and you know, I was kind of shocked at what he told me the parents' reaction was. He said they didn't care. I don't think it's that they didn't care. I think it's the same thing we just read right here. They might feel embarrassed. They might feel helpless. Okay, they might feel like, well, you know, what am I going to do about that? My child's doing what they want to do. They're making their own decisions. They might not feel they have the moral authority to tell their child not to engage in these things because they themselves engaged in it when they were growing up. But we can't think this way. You know, if we want to see a change, if we want to stop this cycle of killing babies, this cycle of government assistance programs. You know, think about all the money. I only named a few things here, the governmental programs that are necessary to finance these things. Just think of all the money we could save on top of the wars. You know, $780 billion a war budget last year or this year. Just think of all the money we could save if we made right decisions, and how that could come back to us. You know, we wouldn't have to be paying all these taxes, number one. We wouldn't have to be funding all these things, which would be savings for all of us. We'd have a much, you know, better lifestyle. You know, nobody should be in need of anything, you know, but the problem is there's too many entities out here that are making too much money off these kind of services. And they just don't think that, you know, if they think that if people stop doing this, they won't be able to make that money. But the truth is, they'd be richer than they can even imagine if people stopped doing this. If people were making right choices, we would all be rich beyond our imagination. Not to mention, we wouldn't be stolen from, like the author just said, right? We wouldn't have to lock our doors because people are choosing not to steal, right? Because they've been taught to choose not to steal. But the education, it has to come. You know, we've got to offer it, and we can't think the job is too big. We got to be relentless. We got to keep pushing this peaceful solution in our own life and sharing it with everyone around us. I found a great way of sharing it recently, you know, because of the COVID restrictions that we have with the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. We don't have the ability to do classes in person. So everything has to be done over the phone or online. Guess what? We've got a lot of people watching right now in Laredo, Texas, that are being assigned to watch this class as part of their program requirements. Okay, that are sent by the court or by CPS. They have to tune in and they have to watch this class right here live. So this is just one way, and many of these people are sharing this with other people. And I've even had results from families that say, you know what? This is perfect. I set my teenage daughter down and I set my teenage son down, and we eat popcorn and we watch the classes, the Peaceful Solution Certification class. Because they say, I don't know how to talk to my teenager about these things. I don't know how to discuss these kind of things with my teenager. But you know what? The Peaceful Solution lays it all out. And the children, they're hearing it from somebody else besides their parents. You know how that goes, right? You can tell a child something 1,000,000 times, and they'll just kind of roll their eyes and look the other way. But a stranger tells them something, they're like, and then the parents looking at them like, I've told you that 1,000 times, you know? But hearing it from somebody else outside the home, it really does help. Okay, and Peaceful Solution is making a huge difference right now in a lot of people's lives worldwide. We have people tuned in right now from all over the world. And each person, they're not thinking this is too big of a job. That's why they're tuned in, right? And they're sharing this with other people. And the Peaceful Solution, which started out very small, is growing and growing and growing. And soon it will fill the whole world. Do you believe that? I believe it. But just we got to keep pushing it in our own life, practicing these things. So look on page 115. Let's finish up here. It says, for some teens, the consequences of making a wrong choice could last a lifetime. Incurable STD, sterility, as well as other physical and psychological damage are the results of engaging in risky behavior. Maintain a positive moral character and set your mind in advance not to be influenced or talked into trying drugs, abusing alcohol, dangerous driving, or experimenting with sex in any fashion, okay? If someone offers you a joint, be responsible and say no. If someone offers you a drink, be courageous and say no. If someone says to you, oh, come on, everybody's doing it, tell them, no, they're not, I'm not. Stand up, grow a backbone. You can do it. You just have to do it one time and the next time and the next time, and pretty soon it becomes a practice. You don't have to give a long explanation. Just say no and mean it. Keep in mind that poor choices can affect you for life. They can also affect your family and your community. So remember that ripple effect. It's not just affecting us. It's affecting everyone. It's affecting all life. It's affecting the environment. Remember what we just saw about the herpes in the coral reef? Don't forget these things. Keep these things in your mind and study these things. Go and read, pull up articles about these kind of things. Then you'll see there's so many different things that have been discovered about how STDs and things are damaging the environment right now. So I'm out of time right now, but we're going to pick up next time on page 116, the next teacher. And I believe, what's the date today? Forgot to look for the next class date. It's going to be Sunday, and I think it's the 11th. Yes, it will be Sunday, April 11th, 2021. Okay, so it'll be this year. You won't have to wait. And you've been a very great class today. I thank everyone here in the audience and everyone that tuned in. Keep practicing the peaceful solution. And because remember, we're going to make a huge difference worldwide. Okay? And this world is going to be a much better place afterward. So at this time, thank you very much.